It is a beautiful morning here in the mountains of southern Appalachia. I'm going to walk around the gardens and show you how everything's doing. It's strange that this is almost August. August will be here this week and our garden should be winding down. But this year's been a different gardening year. We had so much dry weather at the beginning of the summer, pretty much the whole summer, that things didn't do as well. But now that we're back in our regular pattern of getting rain every 3 or 4 days, things have really flushed out. So you can see here these beans, these are our greasy beans, just one small panel of them. But the growth on them looks much more like June instead of August almost. One place you can really see the evidence of the rain, the improvement that it's made, is here in the flower bed right in front of my kitchen window. It was a really dry day that I dug all this up and replanted a lot of the seeds and didn't even know if they would come up. I did keep it watered, but since the rain has been arrived back at our house on a more regular basis, you can see things are really sprouting up and growing. There's a zinnia even blooming. We've got some nasturtiums and some marigolds and a lot of zinnias and some calendula and other things. So maybe I'll get to see more of it bloom before cold weather gets here. This is our Mississippi pink eye peas, and you can just see they look amazing. Again, this looks much more like June instead of end of July, 1st of August. When I was up here the other day looking, I noticed down inside there's some real mushrooms growing. Look at that. There's 2 or 3 of them, and there was some on the outside of the beds too. I have no clue what kind of mushroom that is, or certainly not if it would be edible or not, but there's several of them. In this bed is the sweet potatoes that we planted. We bought sweet potato slips and planted them. We've not planted sweet potatoes in ages. I actually can only remember one time that we planted them in all the years that we've been gardening, and that was only because my Uncle Henry gave me the slips. You can see I've got some ground cherries growing up through the middle of them, and there's even a volunteer tomato plant. I have no clue what kind of plant that is, but we've just let it grow. I don't see any tomatoes on it, but I do see several blooms. Hopefully with all this growth though, that means that we're going to have some sweet potatoes. In this bed is 2 of the beans we were just trying out this year. The painted pony is one of them, and the yellow Kentucky eye. We've not picked any beans off of them yet. I see lots of blooms, and again, since the rain has returned, the growth is just so much better than it was. The rain that we got yesterday, I now have a handy dandy rain gauge here that my friend Ed sent me, and it's a little bit more than a 1/4 inch, so that's what we got yesterday. I feel it sprinkling on us right now. Matt's out here with me walking around. I hope it don't rain out our tour. You think it will? Hope not. We haven't been up here to these beds, and you can see now my pathway is blocked by a big sawbriar. It's not really a sawbriar, that's a blackberry briar. In this first bed, the beans that I planted, not a one of them come up, but it's been took over by morning glories. I don't see any blooms, but maybe they'll begin to, I need to weave them up into the cattle panel since there's nothing in this, and see if I can have a wall of morning glories. That would be pretty. The things we planted in this bed did come up, and again, just amazing growth since that rain. So this is the Holstein peas. These are peas, and they're beginning to weave their way up to the cattle panel. There's one that's founded all the way up to that's the tallest one. It's probably about, I don't know, shoulder high to me. Matt's going to help some of them that are just kind of flopping over. They look great though, don't they? Mm-hmm. So lush and green. Most of the time they'll find their way. Things like this will just eventually find their way and start climbing up like these on this end have done, but it never hurts to kind of help them either if you see them flopping around. On my last tour, when I was talking about bemoaning the fact that we didn't have any rain, I said this was my favorite part of the garden just because it was lusher than the rest of the gardens. And I guess it still is just because of the beauty. You see the hyssop back there in full bloom. I don't know if you can hear, but the bees are just covered up on it. Really, really pretty. And then I've got the echinacea over here, the cone flowers. They're still blooming and doing really good. And then just I'm trying to see where you can see just all the abundance of the herb bed is really, really beautiful this year. I am missing some stuff though. I think I planted cilantro twice, still don't have any cilantro. And the basil that I have in this, and I have some basil over here that we've been enjoying, but the basil here is like the kind that usually gets really huge and big, and it's still just really small. Part of that is, I think, the dryness, but two, it just kept getting shaded out by stuff, and I'd cut stuff back, and then it would just come back and cover it up without me knowing it had, and I'd cut it back a little bit more. But anyway, even though I didn't have my usual standbys, I have enjoyed the lemon balm, the orange balm that we got from Satterfield's, the parsley, and the dill. I've used the dill in my pickles this year. This area of the garden is really benefited from the rain. You can see how lush it looks. My nasturtiums are finally spilling out of the ends of the beds and just flowing out over the walkways. They look so pretty. These red flowers, I can't remember exactly what the name of them is, but I got them from Satterfield's, and they are really just filled out amazingly since the rain arrived. The thing that's not doing as good is those flowers right below them. That's the lantana, and I know they like the hot, drier weather, so they kind of quit blooming, and they're kind of looking pitiful now. I guess one of the things that I'm most pleased about this year is the cucumbers. You can see they're beginning to grow all the way up the cattle panel there. It's not that they've been the best cucumbers because of that dry weather. Now, we have had cucumbers to enjoy to eat, and I've made one run of pickles with them. But mostly I've been so pleased that the pepper spray, and I'll put that link in the description below, actually worked at keeping the squash bugs away. Over on this side's the silver slicers. You can see they're doing way better since the rain too. They've reached up higher, probably about, I don't know, shoulder high to me or something. But I think that like I said, the pepper spray is the main thing I think helped with the squash bugs. But then I do have to think about the other things we did. We tried to turn over the soil. Maybe that helped a little bit. Maybe even the pine, putting pine here and there. Maybe that helped. Maybe it was a combination of all of it. Now, I have still seen a few here and there, but I've just not had any, there's not been infested like they usually are. And so, and if you just see 3 or 4, they're way easier to, one of the best ways people say to prevent squash bugs is to manually go around and pick them off. So if there's 3 or 4, that's much easier to do than if there's, 50 and you come back in an hour and there's 50 more and you just get so frustrated by it. So I will leave the link again to that spray, the recipe that I use. There's all kinds of recipes online, though, if you want to try it. The petunias right outside the greenhouse are really enjoying that extra rain. And just moving them, if you'll remember, if you watch all of our gardening videos, you'll know that they were over on the kind of opposite to where they are now, and they just wasn't doing any good at all. And once I moved them over here, they immediately started doing better. I think they get more sunshine right here. The rain would have been about the same. At that time, of course, we wasn't getting much rain, but I think it was they were lacking sunshine. The cucumbers were actually shading them out, so they've just been so pretty right here in front of the greenhouse. Here's some calendula blooming. They've been pretty as well. Right here, this part of where we had the potatoes, the wild apricots have kind of took over. There's one of their blooms. You can see that one's kind of closed up. It was probably beautiful yesterday, but it's on its way out now. But they are a lovely plant, and they're edible. So Pap always called them wild apricots. Most people call them passion flowers. One thing the rain didn't seem to bother, the lack of rain, I should say, didn't seem to bother, was our tomatoes. They've been doing good all summer long. This is our tomato bed. It's well reached way out the top of the cattle panels there and just continuing to grow. We've really been enjoying them, and they're still just hanging full. Lots of tomatoes this year. I see a few of the black cherry that have kind of got splits in them, though, probably from the rain that we had yesterday. If you do have a lot of rain and it kind of starts splitting your tomatoes, one tip is you can go ahead and pick them when they're, kind of turning but not all the way ripe, and take them inside, and a lot of times that'll help prevent those splits. This flower bed is one I've worked really hard on this year and still not pleased with it at all. It'll just be a work in progress for the next few years. But the things are doing better that are in it. The blanket flower that Corey got me for Mother's Day even bloomed again. Looks like it's still got some blooms about to open up. The one sunflower that I planted here that actually come up is supposed to be a dwarf sunflower. Last year, the ones I planted was smaller than this. They stayed really low to the ground. It finally did bloom. You can see it's turned its head down now. It's finished blooming. And the lantana and the vinca that I planted are filling out. And even the marigolds are beginning to bloom and filling out. So better than it was on the last garden tour, but still not exactly what I would want it to be. The nasturtiums I planted in my greenstalk, the ones that come up, everything didn't come up, but the ones that did are really leafed out and pretty. I've not seen any blooms on them yet, although there's one right there about to open. So that'll be the first one there, the orange one that's about to open. And that one little pocket that has something different in it, that's basil, a little type of basil that's coming up there. If I'd got these planted earlier in the summer, they would have done better, the nasturtiums. Maybe that'll be my goal next year, is to plant maybe a mixture of nasturtiums and herbs in the greenstalk. This is our bed of Cherokee purples, and teasingly, Matt made sure that this year that they were all Cherokee purples. He helped me with that, since last year me and Corey kind of messed it up. And Matt has really been enjoying them. They've done good, and he's been eating tomato sandwiches so much that his mouth's sore probably. He just loves them, and he's really got to enjoy them. And I think there's going to be enough. We usually, the tomatoes that we just can the ones that we grow, that, when they all start coming in, you can't, no matter how many tomato sandwiches Matt eats, he can't eat that many tomatoes. So we usually just can those. So I'm sure that's in our near future, Matt, right?
Yes.
At this end of the bed here with the arch, you can see our Malabar spinach is going all the way. It's almost reached the top. Well, it has reached the top on both sides, but I mean, it's almost met in the middle, if you will. This is the gypsy peppers here, and our peppers haven't done as good this year. For part of the reason is the lack of rain there early on, but mostly we just didn't somehow fail to plant as many as we usually do, so we've not had as many peppers. And that was because all the things I started inside just didn't do good this year. The peppers were a total flop. The cabbage was a flop. Really, the only thing that was a success starting ahead of time was the tomatoes. This is our other pepper bed. These are the cowhorn. I can never remember the name, but I think the cowhorn peppers from Betty. And they're good. They're tasty. They're a sweet pepper. And then down there in the middle is some jalapeno plants. And they've just kind of been struggling along all summer. They're doing better now that they've been getting rain. And I see 2 little jalapenos on them. So I finally got jalapenos growing. This is our 2 rows of tomatoes down here. And they look better, especially these on this end, except there's one out there that's a brandywine that just has completely died. It's got tomatoes on it, but the whole plant's dead. I have no idea what happened to it. As far as the new varieties that we've been growing, this is mostly all the new ones that we're growing down here. Matt's got to eat so far the Randy Hooper, what I'm calling it, was some heirloom seed from Debbie at Bryson Farm Supply, and me and him both really liked it. I think we've ate a brandywine. Of course, we liked that. And that's all the ones we've got to try so far. The black creme is just now starting to, that's the ones you can see there, just starting to turn. So maybe we'll at least get to eat those and try them, see what we think about them. Now, this part of our garden really does look like it's almost August, or is August, basically, by the time you see this. Will it be August? What is today? Today's the 30th? Yeah. I'm having to ask Matt what day of the month it is. So, yeah, by the time you see this, it will be August. This part really does look like it because it's part of the garden that we're already, kind of putting back to bed. We've harvested all the cabbage. We pulled up all the beets. We did go ahead and pull up all of the beans on that first row as you go down through there because they were doing so bad, and we've replanted beans. And you can see they're tall enough that you can see them. They're trying to reach up to the cattle panel. Now, whether we'll make a lot of beans from that this late in the year, I'm not sure, but we're hoping. And then that row in the back, that is the mother beans that's doing good. And I still haven't eaten any of them, but I've got some beans that I'm going to cook from them. It'll be the first time. I'm excited about that. And then the next, beside the mother beans, is the butter beans. And thank you. So many of you told me how to know when they're ripe. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I'm going to just keep letting them hang there until they get fuller and I can actually tell. So thank you so much to everybody that helped with that. Our oakery's finally beginning to get a little bit taller. It's still, usually by this time of the year, it seems like it's taller than this. Again, it was probably that dry weather. There's one out there on the very end that's about waist high. The rest of it's, I guess, about thigh high. But we've been getting oakery, so we can't complain about the size. This part of the garden is a real mess. I never did get my flowers weeded, and there's some stuff that's still growing from early in the spring. And then the squash and cucumbers, not squash and cucumbers, squash and zucchini that we had growing back there that you can see. We bought those from Satterfields. We have got squash and zucchini, I keep wanting to call them cucumbers, off of them this year, so we've enjoyed those. But they're beginning to die back too. I've already pulled a couple of them up and got rid of them, and the others probably won't be too long before I need to do that to them. This part of the garden is our parsnips and our carrots. We've been pulling up some of the carrots when we need carrots here and there, and they've been really tasty. I pulled up one parsnip, mostly just to see how big it was. It was very, very small, but it is the first time we grew parsnips. And a lot of people, again, told me I should wait and let those stay there until after it frost, and then they'd be sweeter. So we probably won't harvest them anytime soon. This is where we planted our winter squash. So there's some pumpkins, some butternuts, some cushaws down here, and they're just now beginning to run. I'm not sure they're going to have time to make, to be honest with you. We got them planted late, and then that dry weather really just hampered their growth. So I'm not sure we'll manage to even get a pumpkin or a butternut squash this year, or a cushaw. This may be a total flop for us. I have had to use the pepper spray down here too. The squash bugs, of course, they love these things as much as they love my cucumbers. So I've been using it down here, and again, something you have to continually do, but it does seem to work. So here's the big garden. Certainly not as pristine and beautiful as we had hoped, but again, we have to kind of take what we can get. You can see the corn there looking pretty good. It's looking good. What you can't see over behind it is all of the corn that's laying down. A lot of it got laid down in a storm, and most of it has not straightened back up. But we're thankful for what is standing and hopeful that we're going to get to eat some fresh corn. This part of the garden, you can see straight up through there towards Corey and Austin's house. These two rows, if you can tell, they're bean rows. This is the butter beans and the peanut beans that we planted and the deer ate, and they come right back out. And they're growing, but it was just that dry weather. They just didn't do very good. And now at this late state in the year, I'm not sure that they're going to have time to actually bloom and produce, and that we'll get anything out of them. But they did come back. The deer, when they nibble off your leaves, if you can keep them from coming back and doing it again, usually the plants will kind of rebound. So Matt has snuck over here and pulled an ear of corn. The last one I pulled and looked at was way too small. Ooh, pretty corn. So I looked about a week ago, and I actually took some to Corey. I said, it's so tiny. I don't know if you and Austin do anything with it, but ooh, that is beautiful corn. Beautiful. Beautiful. If you've never grown corn before, you may be wondering, well, what in the world is that mess at the top there, Tipper? It's corn. Growing corn is like growing anything else at your house. It's never going to look pristine like it looks in the grocery store, and that is caused by a worm, right, Matt? Mm-hmm. And there's different things you can do to try to prevent that. Of course, you can use, sprays and pesticides and things like that. But what we do is we use a knife, and we just cut that part off, and then we eat the rest of the corn. So that looks beautiful. Beautiful. I'm so excited. And that is our first Silver Queen corn that we have grown in almost 10 years. Yay!
It's been 10 or a little more.
So Matt, tonight we're going to have this for supper. Yeah. And Granny and Paul can have some for supper, and Corey and Austin and whoever. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. I looked about a week ago, but it was so tiny, and then I thought, give yourself 2 weeks and look.
Just look for the black seal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good thing to tell, Matt. That's one way that you'll know is to look. Hold that back up, Matt. Is to look at the silks when they turn black or dark brown. That gives you an indication that the corn is ready. Matt says that corn may get eaten for breakfast. If you're wondering what's sitting in the chair here, that's one of our deer alarms. I don't know. You've probably heard them going off in our videos, but Matt, you want to walk in front of this one and see if it'll go off? I warn you, it's loud. Pretty terrifying, huh? There's little settings on it that you can change you don't have to have the guns and the dog at the same time. You can even make your own. You know, I teased about Matt making one that said, "Get out of my garden." So a lot of people have asked us, do they work? Well, so far it seems like they work. We've not seen deer in the garden. We've got them up at Granny's, not been deer in her garden again. So we're thinking that they do work. And we first found out about them. I'll put the link in the description below. But we found out about them from one of you. One of you told us about them. And you had seen them on the channel True Grit Appalachian Ways. If you've never visited their channel, it's a beautiful family, great channel. I'll leave that in the description below too, so you can go visit them. But they had used them. So one of you seen that they said they worked for them and told us about them, and we tried them, and so far we're pleased with them. I don't know if everybody in the rest of the holler can hear them when they go off, but certainly Corey and Austin and us and Granny can, and we've all kind of got a good life over hearing that several times a day. And they are, another thing you can do with them is you can set them where they only go off at night if that's what you want, or only a certain time of the day. And in the beginning we were just going to make them go off at night. That's what we were going to do, but then I kind of forgot about that, and then we let them go off during the day too. But then I don't remember if it was Paul or Granny reminded me, well, deer have been in the garden during the day too. It ain't just at night, because we've seen them. So we just left them like they are. The potatoes that we planted down here are finally dying back. Matt, have you looked to see if we have potatoes? I know he looked one day and he didn't. He don't think they've made any potatoes. Of course, we're going to look at every last one of them, but we won't be in a hurry to do it. But they have died back, so either they made or they didn't make, whichever they did. So the squash, there's one long row of squash and zucchini down here. I think I've got one squash so far off of them. No zucchini. I see some baby squash right there on that one. But we got them planted late. But they look way better than the ones up at our house. Of course, they may get diseased, and the squash bugs may find them down here. I think I've come down here one time and sprayed them with the pepper spray. And then it was so dry, it was like nothing was going to make. And I thought, well, I'm not going to extend my energy down there, but I probably need to bring my spray down here and do it again. Here's more of a close-up view of the beans and the butter beans. Those beans are looking good. Granny might actually get some peanut beans. I see some blooms on that one. Here's another view of the back of the corn, and you can see where some of it's laid down. That's the part that don't look as good. But even in there's some still standing, so hopefully those ears will have developed like those nice ones Matt showed us. Here's the little watermelon patch we have down here. They have not done very well. They started off looking fantastic, but that dry weather really hampered them. And then what happened is, once all that moisture come all at once, some of them just split open from the moisture. That one right there still looks like it's doing fairly well. Maybe I'll get to eat that one. The Mother's Day beans that Matt planted and cucumbers for Corey, they've not done any good, really. I think it was the dryness, but where we planted them is kind of an area of the garden that's wet. It's like got a wet weather spring, so it's the wettest part of the garden, and they still didn't do that great. Now, the deer did eat them down, and then they grew back out. You can see now they're up to the top there, but didn't do like we wanted them to for sure. And I think there's one cucumber that's actually reached the cattle panel, but it's not produced any cucumbers. Here's the grapes that's left from my brother Steve, his little orchard that he had here. They look really great. I actually come over the weekend, me and Matt did, and took home, how much did we take home, Matt? Maybe 2 gallons? Mm-hmm. And Corey's been eating some of them, but we left all the ones that wasn't ripe, but I said in a day or two they'll be ripe, and boy, they are. So somebody's going to have to come back and get them, make them. I just canned mine and made grape juice with it so that I could make jelly later on when I had more time. They look nice, though. On the way back up the hill, we stopped to let you have a peek at Granny's little garden here. You can see her beautiful old maids. They're doing good. Probably the best thing in her garden there. Now, Paul watered her garden pretty much every day during that dry weather, but watering just doesn't do what rain can do. And her squash and zucchini that we planted is just now really beginning to come out, so I hope that she gets some from them. Just last week, Paul and Granny come out here together. You can see this little bean row they've created with their, I guess that's mop handles or broom handles. And you can see, though, the beans, those are white half runners. They've already sprouted up. So hopefully she'll get some beans from that. Her tomato plants back there in the back didn't do no good. There's only one still living. Well, two, I guess, but she's not got any tomatoes, I don't think. Over here is her cornfield beans that she's so crazy about. They are just now beginning to reach that bottom rung of the cattle panel. What happened to them is the deer ate them, and then they had to come back out. We planted some extra in there, and then the ones they had nibbled the leaves had to have time to come back out. And again, the dry weather hampered them. And then the other thing is, cornfield beans are just slow. They usually don't start producing until the end of the growing season. These are Granny's red hull peas, and they were actually looking the best they had ever looked. It's because we had all those trees cut, and they're getting way more sunshine than they usually do. And then the deer come and ate them almost down to the ground. But you can see they've flushed back out now, and we have one of our deer alarms sitting right beside them, and added, of course, the ribbons and some pie plates and stuff. So now they're growing pretty good, and they've almost reached the bottom. One or two of them has reached the bottom of the cattle panels. So maybe Granny will get some peas from them. These were the beans Granny had me plant in her little planters, and they're actually doing pretty good. The deer were kind of nibbling on them, and Paul built this little barricade around them. He put the buckets and the stakes and stuff just to try to scare the deer off. I don't know that she's got any beans from them, but Granny puts beans everywhere she can put them. She's got some in the front of her house, as you go up on her little porch to go into the house. She always grows some right there too in little containers. Well, I hope you enjoyed walking around the gardens with me and Matt this morning and seeing how everything is doing. It has been a very strange gardening year. If you're a gardener, though, it seems like every year there's some kind of oddity, or there's always stuff you're fighting, whether it's the weather that you can do nothing about, or pests like deer and squash bugs and things like that. But this year has been strange in that the garden that we have right now is much more like the typical garden for June, for the end of June, maybe even the middle of June for some of the stuff, especially the squash and the beans like we planted down at the big garden. So definitely been a kind of strange, it's like we took this part and swapped places with it. That part of the garden looked much more, except there was no growth, but as far as the brownness of the leaves and all that, looked much more like the end of the garden. Now this end of the garden looks much more like it should have then, if that makes sense. As a gardener, there's always strange things like that, though, that you're dealing with. Just like life, gardening is a great thing to compare to life lessons that you can learn in the garden. So many things apply in the same way. You can really learn a lot by being a gardener, by growing your own food. It's really rewarding to do that, to feed your family if you're able to, if you have the land, if you have the ability, if you're able. It's really rewarding, really tasty, but also really gives you an insight, I think, into the nature of life. And all the years that we've gardened, along with that strangeness that I've noticed and frustration a lot of times, there's also always things that, maybe this is doing really bad, but this is doing really good. There's highlights, I guess highs and lows, again, like life. So I'm so excited that the pepper spray that we've been using has at least, held the squash bugs at bay. They've not totally disappeared, but at least held them at bay. So that's just one of the best things that's happened this year. And then, amazing today to see that beautiful corn. Me and Matt have wanted to grow corn for so long. And since Pap died, that's just not been possible. My brother had an orchard there, and that was wonderful, and that was good, and he enjoyed it. But we missed growing the corn, of course. Now, a lot of people have said, well, Tipper, why don't you just grow it up at your house? Well, we've tried, and we've tried, and we finally just give up. We didn't plant near that much, of course, but we tried growing a row or something, and there's just not enough sunlight up here. It's strange, but that's how environment and climate and weather all work together. Just we're not very far away from the big garden, but we're just far enough up the mountain ridge that we don't get the same sunshine that garden gets. We just don't get a full, complete day of sunshine that the corn desperately needs to grow and to produce. So while our corn would grow, it would never really get above, I don't know, shoulder high or something like that. And even if it did manage, one year I think we grew like an old-time variety, not a sweet corn, and it did get pretty tall, but then the ears just didn't develop on it. There's just not enough sunshine. So that's why we never tried growing it up here. We finally just gave up on that, and always was really grateful that Farmer Tim down the road, he grows corn, and he would sell us some every year, so we did have fresh corn. It was just not from our garden. Another thing about being a garden is that you're always hopeful. So now that our weather pattern has returned back to normal, what we usually have, which is rain, every few days, now I'm hopeful. I'm hoping that there's enough of the summer left that those beans down there will produce, that the things up here that have really, took on a second flush, that they'll continue to produce, and that we'll really get a bountiful harvest, even though it may be much later this year than usual. I'm always glad when you stop by to help me celebrate Appalachia, which is a whole lot about making a garden.